Thank you. I know earlier it said I was Chief Design Strategist at Fresh Tilled Soil, but I've actually just recently, 2 weeks, got a new job. So I'm now head of product and experience at a company called WorkBar. Happy to talk more about that later, because I want to talk about roadmaps. In particular, I'll start out with the story of my first roadmap. So it looked something like this. It was about 10 years ago is when I had to make it, and my boss had asked me to put a roadmap together because we had a lot of different products that we're trying to develop. Some of them were chemistry products, which is why you see some of the things like RNA clean. So yeah, I love the DNA references because I was in the DNA world. And actually I had to get DNA to work together with software, to work together with hardware. Getting all those three things to work together was a real pain. So if you think you just have to deal with software, sometimes having, say, Rails work with React might be frustrating, but trying to get DNA to work with software and hardware, that's even more frustrating. But I put something like this together, and I sent it out to the team saying, all right, here's the plan, here's the roadmap for how we're going to release these products. And the next day, my inbox looked something like this. I pretty much set myself on fire because I had so many people that were so pissed off at me, and I was shocked because I thought, well, wait a minute, isn't this what you asked me for? You asked me for some certainty. You wanted to know when the sales team wanted to know when were certain products going to be released. The research team wanted to know what to work on first, second, and third. The software engineers needed to know what software to develop for what products and when. And I thought I was doing a good thing by doing this, but apparently not. I was actually setting myself on fire. And it turns out I'm not the only product person to have done this. I've worked with a lot of clients over the last few years, and even the folks who were in the workshop a couple days ago had to do this little exercise called Dear Roadmap. And they write breakup letters to their roadmaps. You know, I can't do this anymore. We have the same problems. Every 3 months, we review the same mix of features. We don't have any new information. We don't have alignment on our strategy. I am done. Right? Dear, this was from the other day. I hate you. First 3 words. I hate you. Right? So you're bashing too many things. Like, I need a roadmap that inspires. And this is probably one of my favorites. I've been putting so much energy into this. I feel like I'm not getting anything back from you. You're always out of date. There's no way all the information is actually readable. You're all about solutions. You're not about the needs and problems. And you're not going to address all my stakeholders. And then they added the kicker. This is it. I'm going back to Microsoft Project. So clearly roadmaps were broken. And after my first experience with it, I was like, well, roadmaps suck, right? So that was part of the reason why I decided to embark on this mission to try to, how do we think about this in a different way? How can we look at this differently? And I asked, how do we get here? And I found this paper that was published, it was a conference paper published early this year. And if you just look at the introduction, and I'll zoom it in for you, the engineers are depressed. The project grinds them down, blah, 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 right? There is waste everywhere. So even in 2017, we're still struggling with waste in our development process, the way we actually develop and deliver software to the market. This was, I think, May 2017 at a conference. And it's you might recognize some big institutions there, Pivotal Labs, Carnegie Mellon, so there's no joke here, right? The paper also talked about different types of waste, and they compared it with lean software methods and Toyota production methods, because let's face it, lean came from Toyota. Toyota invented the lean way. And the things that stuck out to me, not only was the psychological distress I thought pretty interesting, but the thing I want to focus on a little bit is, well, why are we building the wrong product? We're still building the wrong product. We're still mismanaging our backlog. We're still doing things over and over again that we shouldn't be. Why? It's 2017, man. Like, we can do all sorts of crazy stuff. Why are we still doing this, right? So I asked myself, how did we even get here? Well, my curiosity to this question actually takes us back kind of a ways. So I love the fact that Jeremy talked a little bit about history, in particular specialization, because I want to go back to 1776 and say, well, if you remember Adam Smith, for those who remember economics class, he talked about division of labor. And particularly, he had an example about a pin factory where they had 18 different steps, and they had 10 different people doing those 18 steps, and they specialized in 2 or 3 different steps. By doing that, they were able to make way more pins more effectively and efficiently than if you had those same 10 people making the pin from start to finish. so that division of labor helps speed up productivity. Okay, so we just started to divide things up a little bit. Then Frederick Taylor came along and started doing scientific management. Now, if you read a little bit about Frederick Taylor, you might think he's kind of an asshole. He did a lot of good things from the manufacturing perspective in terms of being very scientific about how we manage our manufacturing processes. But he also took it to the extreme of trying to basically pull out any kind of mental capacity needed to do manufacturing. Even to the point where he was doing motion studies and showing people how they should actually move their hands to do certain processes in the manufacturing line. Trying to just take out the human, criticized for being, I guess, dehumanizing some of the manufacturing process at the time. One of his employees, or one of his apprentices, was a guy named Henry Gantt. So, right, Gantt charts, right? This is one of the first Gantt charts that was used to measure those manufacturing processes. And a Gantt chart basically says, here's the tasks, here's the timeline, here's the progress, here's how long it's going to take. And then we started to make some additions saying, well, here's the progress we're at right now. Okay, so now we're getting a way to visualize. We've specialized the work. We've divided the work up a little bit. We've started to manage it a little bit more specifically. We're now visualizing it in ways we can see what progress looks like. Right? So this is how we're getting to these kinds of things. And then it goes from just managing particular tasks to now managing particular phases, what's the critical path, having lots and lots more complexity into this kind of thing. Okay. Automation comes along in the 1940s, and particularly Ford was leading this, and they started to use individual components that were more regular. So we just heard about web components. I think Jeremy mentioned web components. You mentioned you use web components, that using those standardized process in your approach to building things, right? Automating things, taking some of the sort of craft element out of repetitive processes that have to be done the exact same way over time, right? Yesterday, I think grunt and gulp were mentioned a bunch of times as ways to automate parts of our process, right? That allowed us to push forward our ability to make things. Then Toyota comes along and says, hey, I think we can manufacture things a little bit differently. We can actually reduce waste by being lean, right? By doing continuous improvement, right? So we can think about ways to do this. They put a bunch of principles out. And if you want a great example of how Toyota and GM work together, if you've ever heard of the NUMMI example, there's a podcast on This American Life that was published a few years ago that talks about the NUMMI plant, which is now the Tesla plant. But at the time, the NUMMI plant was General Motors' Fremont, California plant, and it was the worst performing plant in their entire operation. To the point where, because of the labor unions and because they were far away from Detroit, the managers didn't seem to care, the employees didn't seem to care. There's reports of people doing drugs on the job, people having sex on the job, on the clock, people actually putting different doors on different cars, because what that would do is that would make them actually get overtime because they'd have to go take the doors off and put the right ones back on. So it was just a mess. So when GM and Toyota wanted to come to the United States, and GM said, okay, you know what? Take this Fremont, California plant. And they said, oh, and by the way, you got to keep everybody. And so Toyota said, no problem, we'll train them. Well, within a very short period of time, after training them in their Toyota approach, the Toyota way, same managers, same product, same manufacturing line, huge improvement, and became one of GM's top performing. So it went worst to almost first, didn't quite get to the top performing, right? Because they used a new way to approach things, a new mindset and a new process by reducing waste and empowering the individual. Very cool. Raise your hand if you do Agile. So 2001, Agile Manifesto, right? Lots of people doing Agile. Keep your hand up if you've actually read the Agile Manifesto. Have you gone to Agile? Good, most of you actually did, great. I've actually asked people, I said, have you actually gone to Agile Manifesto? Have you actually read it? And a lot of people are like, no, I didn't know it existed. So here's a screenshot. And there's 4 main values here, right? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over lots of documentation. Customer collaboration, right? For those who do Agile, how many of you in this room have actually talked to a customer or visited a customer in the last month? Awesome. I only see about 25% of you though. I hope all of you do that. right? Because we all need to be, as Jeremy said, really focused on the user, all right? And the last one is responding to change, right? So let's not necessarily follow a detailed plan. Sure, plans are important, they're helpful, but let's also make sure we're able to respond to change. I think that's where some of the roadmap things that I struggled with failed, is that it was this plan that didn't have room for change. There's a whole bunch of, there's 12 principles that underlie those 4 basic values. I won't get into them in detail. I encourage you all to go read them and think, are we actually following these? Challenge yourself, challenge your teammates, challenge your manager. Are you actually following these? And if not, why not? So then you say, oh, but see, Todd, lean startup, right? Lean startup came in and saved us all, right? It was this build, measure, learn cycle where we could build things, we could measure it and learn. And Eric Ries wrote a book about it, and it's really awesome, and we try to do it. But my guess is when you try to do it, what you actually get is this. Where's the measure? Where's the learn, right? And this also assumes you know what to build. And that's the thing I think that sometimes we miss, is we think we know exactly what to build. And we have something like software, which is very different than, say, manufacturing a car, where you have to do a lot of research up front and a lot of design up front before you actually get to the point of manufacturing and executing it. Software allows us, by its nature, to be able to deploy things and then change them quickly. We have software patches all the time, right? Because we aren't perfect software developers. We create bugs, not necessarily intentionally, but they happen by the way of trying to get things done. As soon as we know exactly what the right feature set to build is too, right? And all this is because we seek certainty in an uncertain world. We want to know what's going to happen, right? Our sales team wants to know, and marketing team wants to know when these features are going to be ready so we can market them and sell them, right? And we can't always guarantee the exact date and the exact time, because sometimes we're building things we've never built before. But this is a human thing, and how do we design for that? So I want to talk about a roadmap approach, and particularly a problem approach, not necessarily a solution approach, right? And I use this example a lot, especially when I teach at IE, is that, well, okay, tell my MBAs this all the time. I say, okay, there's water on the floor. What do you do? Well, you need to mop it up. Okay. Well, are you asking me why there's water on the floor? Oh, yeah. Well, there's a leaky pipe. Maybe it wasn't somebody spilt water with their water bottle. It was actually a pipe that burst. Okay, so we go replace the pipe. Problem solved, right? No. What happens if you come in tomorrow and the pipe's still leaky? Well, hang on. Well, wait, why is the pipe leaking? Oh, the pressure was too high, it turns out. So with the water pressure too high, so it caused at the joints, was bursting. All right, well, why is the pressure too high? Well, our pressure regulator's busted. Oh, okay, so let's replace the pressure regulator. Well, wait, why is the pressure regulator busted? Oh, we actually didn't inspect it frequently enough, and it just kind of went over its maintenance schedule. All right, so we started out with water on the floor, and we ended up at maintenance schedules. Right? Digging into the problem and finding what the right problem to solve is incredibly important. And this isn't always done. I've worked with countless software teams who think that they stop at the mop, the equivalent of the mop. Like, yeah, this is it. We need to do this thing. And we need to build this onboarding flow. And that's actually going to solve everything. Well, hang on. Is that really going to solve everything? When I was working at Constant Contact many years ago, we had an executive who thought this mobile app was going to be the thing. She was ready to not write a check, but basically staff a team of 12 engineers and a combination of engineers, designers, and product managers on this mobile app project to get an app in the App Store in about 3 or 4 months. And it turns out it was the completely wrong solution. She was at the mop stage, right? And she didn't realize that what was actually going on was something deeper. Could have been a $250,000 loss. Glad we didn't do it. So let's just think about what is product, right? What is product? Where a lot of us are designers and engineers and developers in this room. Let's talk about product for a minute. Product is something that tries to bridge a customer need and a business objective. Customer has a need, right? The user has a need. We also have a business. We want to make a profit. We want to deliver value. Well, our product sits in the middle, right? Or it can be our service. It could be our space. It could be our feet. Whatever those are, those features, right? Customer needs are problems to be solved for. Business objectives are outcomes we're trying to get. Features are the stuff we make to actually deliver value to both sides of those things. Another way to look at it is I don't think any product management presentation should happen without a Venn diagram. So here it is, right? You are here, you're in the middle, right? As a product person, and even if you are just a front-end developer, sorry, I'm not trying to, that's not what I mean. Designer, just a product manager, right? Just a business analyst, just a CEO. You're in the middle of these things, and you've got to think differently. You've got to think with a combination of those things, right? And so a product manager does a lot of different things. I think what I like to think it does is I think this is what a product manager does. This is what I like to think I do, right? But I think engineering thinks more like this is what I do as a product person, right? And design, well, they think I do this, right? But what I actually do is something a little more like this, right? Juggling a lot of different things, right? And I think that's what really a product person does. You're trying to juggle and make a lot of different trade-offs, keep a lot of balls in the air. And I often say that a good product manager is a designtist. You're a combination of designer and a scientist, right? You have to be empathic, you have to be a maker, right? You have to be forward-thinking, you have to be a creator, have a creator mindset, but you also have to have that scientific mindset of being rigorous, being very experimental, and, as Jerry mentioned, checking your assumptions, right? A good scientist says, what are my assumptions about this problem, and how can I create a hypothesis and validate or invalidate those assumptions, right? And that's what you need to do as a good product person. So, all right. See, Todd, you've been talking about all this. What the hell is a damn roadmap? This is what the title of your talk is, right? So what is a product roadmap? Good question, right? Well, let's go back just the roadmap metaphor for a minute. So let's say we're going on a trip, and I plug in some Google Maps. I'm going to be going from Lisbon to Braga. What happened? How does this work, right? How can I get there? Well, a roadmap has a destination in mind. You're going somewhere, right? That destination is ultimately your product vision. There's different ways you can get there, right? You could go by train, you could go by flight. Now, some of them, once you make a decision to go a certain way, you can't turn around and go another direction. If I decide that I'm going to take a train, I've got to wait to the next train station to get off. I want to then go drive or fly, right? And I may not be able to fly. Let's say if I stopped in the middle somewhere, I may not be able to fly from unless there's an airport somewhere in the middle, right? So the roadmap has to think about the same thing in terms of a product roadmap. And here it is, like there's 5 basic components to a roadmap. And I've looked at hundreds of roadmaps over the last few years and worked with a lot of different teams. How's a product vision? What's your destination? Where are you going? What's your product look like, right? What's our direction? What are your business objectives, right? Remember I mentioned your product sits between customer needs and business objectives. What are those things, right? What's the time frame we're going to do these things in? And what are these themes? And I'll get to a little bit more detail in themes in a minute. And of course, a disclaimer, right? Because things change. So actually putting that disclaimer on is really important, right? So vision's really, really important. Where are we going? If you don't have a clear product vision, and I mean product vision, not a company mission or vision, but what about your product? I'll give you an example. Google's company mission is to organize the world's information. But if you look at the products that they all have product visions or product missions, however you want to call them. And there's some logical relationship between that product vision and the company vision. And anytime you have a company that's bigger than, say, one product, you likely have to think about this. Now, some of you may or may not have a product vision, but you should definitely think about, if I don't, what should it be? Because where are we going with this, right? Why does your product exist? We have all this technology that Jeremy told us about, but in service of what? What are we trying to accomplish? Right? So a roadmap might want to look, this is a fictitious example I created to just try to show what these things might look like in a roadmap, right? You got your vision. Where are you going? Your business objectives. What are we trying to do as a business, right? We're trying to increase our unit sales. We're trying to decrease the number of returns. Those are the things we're trying to accomplish right now. What's our time frames? What are those time horizons? And when are we going to do these things called themes? Now, these themes aren't necessarily features. They're not a list of features and a list of dates, right? And of course, that disclaimer. Public example from GitHub. They do the now, next, near term, medium term, and long term. They have time frames, they have their themes, and they have their disclaimer. Notice they don't put their business objectives. That doesn't surprise me because it's a publicly facing roadmap. They may not want to put their business objectives there, right? This one is an internal example from Chef, if you know the DevOps platform, chef.io. So they have things organized by themes. They do the sort of now, next, and later kind of approach and timeframes, and they have their objectives written there. When they present it externally, obviously some of this information changes. So what do I mean by themes? Well, themes are ultimately a promise to solve a problem. Because if you have a bunch of features, and those features don't solve the problem that you initially want them to, well then you haven't solved the problem. And you should actually keep this thing on your roadmap, right? So it isn't necessarily about the features, it's about the thing you're trying to solve. Because what are the features intended to do? They're intended to solve some kind of problem, deliver some kind of value to your customer, user, stakeholder, etc. Right? So this is a list of themes where I work my new job. First thing I started to do was, what are the different themes? What are we trying to do? I pulled stuff from GitHub, Jira, and Zendesk and said, all right, let's categorize these things into themes and sub-themes. And for each theme or sub-theme, I have a hypothesis. I have an outcome I want to drive towards, and I have some kind of status. Like, is it in a ship it type status? Are we trying to get this thing out the door? Or is it maybe a think it kind of status? And I'll touch a little bit more on what I mean by that. So in addition to the 5 primary components, there's 5 secondary components, like product area. Or maybe you do have features and solutions. Maybe they've gone through some kind of discovery and you have validation. Great. You can put the solution. It might be easier to communicate if it's on your roadmap as a feature. But you still should probably have it categorized under a theme that's about a problem. Maybe you have some confidence, and I'll show you what I mean in a second by that, or particular target customers, or some development stage. Right? Here's Buffer App's public roadmap, and they have different product areas by color code. Is that a fire? I hope not. And they have some of, and a lot of it, what they list is features and not necessarily themes. Right? And confidence, this is from Predictive Index, they actually show, and it varies per roadmap, but they show a differing layer of confidence. As you go further out into the future, their confidence is diminished. This is basically saying, look, we're not confident we're going to deliver this thing. So if they show this to an internal stakeholder or an external stakeholder, somebody looks at it and says, oh yeah, but you're going to have Form 5 in Q4 2016. That's awesome. You say, well, yeah, okay, maybe, but there's about maybe 80% confidence we're actually going to be there. So there's a 20% chance we might not do this thing. I think that's the big part of this, is to manage expectations. One of the people I interviewed in researching product roadmaps, this guy Jim Garrettson, he said, it didn't matter the fact that they knew that next quarter I had this particular feature or particular theme on the roadmap. He's like, they knew I wasn't going to deliver it then, and it wasn't going to be in the spec that was actually on the roadmap. He's like, it was an anxiety reduction tool so that they saw, okay, we're thinking about it, they're working on it. That's all they cared about. I was like, wow, roadmap is an anxiety reduction tool. What a great thing to do. And I thought this shows how roadmaps don't have to be this elegant, visual, beautiful thing. This is just an Excel spreadsheet, basically, but it's done really, really well. Why? Because not only do they have their objectives, like improved communications, and then their themes, right, listed underneath those objectives in a hierarchical fashion, they also have some of them that are listed as target customers, right? So member chat, advisor onboarding. Actually, this is sort of sanitized from a client, so all the details are a little bit changed. But I think it's very, very elegantly done, and they have all of the stages: think it, ship it, tweak it, right? Am I in discovery? Am I in delivery? And if you don't have a dichotomy of discovery and delivery, and this is where I think we're in a bit of a post-agile world, because maybe we do have to let the pendulum swing just a little bit back and do some things in sequence before you do other things. So discovery isn't delivery, and trying to do them at the same time is really hard, and most teams fail. Right? Discovery is, what's the right thing to make? What's the product to build? Delivery is saying, then how do we then build that the right way? Right? How do we use the technologies that we have, harness them to deliver on the value of the right thing? And you've seen there's lots of double diamond graphs out there. This is more conceptual. This one's from ThoughtWorks, but this is where the discovery is. Discovery is on one side of this, right? Do this first before you try to deliver something, right? Be wrong here. Check your assumptions here before you actually write too much code, push too much product, and like that study said, people are building the wrong feature or product. So do this up here first, okay? So our roadmap process that we do at WorkBar, which I've done with other clients as well, is first thing you do is you gather input from lots of different places and try to put it into some repository, where what I've done basically is dumped everything into Zendesk. Right? I then prioritize those themes into, create the themes, prioritize everything into some kind of theme. And then I put it on a roadmap What are the things that are the higher priority ones are ones we work on now, the lesser priority next and later. Obviously, there may be some dependencies that might change that a little bit. That's fine. We might tag things, think it, solve it, ship it, tweak it. Are they in discovery? Are they in delivery? And what this is doing is this is helping manage expectations. Just because it's on the roadmap for now, but doesn't mean I'm necessarily shipping it. It means I might be thinking about it right now. I might be trying to validate, does the problem exist? If the problem exists, okay, does my solution solve that problem? And I want to understand that before I spend too much time and energy trying to deliver that solution to market. And then once we've got that clear, okay, then we can put into something like a project plan or a release plan, right? Release plan, project plan, very different than a roadmap, right? And we prioritize things by a classic ROI. Well, what's the value we're delivering? What's our effort in getting there? And that should give us some kind of priority score, right? Time and resources, t-shirt sizing can do really well here. Value, the contribution to business objectives and or customer needs, right? And actually the way for the people from the workshop, like what are the business objectives? Let's add those up, multiply those by the customer impact, right? And then divide that by our effort. And there's another element you can add in is confidence. How confident are you that all those estimates are right? You might have more data about business objectives. You might have more data about customer impact on certain elements than you do on others, right? And I just put this into a spreadsheet in a scorecard. All the green things are the value, divide that by effort, and you get a score. And now you have a rubric. So when somebody comes in and says, I need this feature, I need this thing, I need that thing, you say, okay, hang on. You need that feature, what problem does that solve? Oh, okay, so that's under this kind of theme. Great. Let's put that in and see where this lays up. Okay, well, this actually puts it into priority 3. Sorry, it's not priority number 1 right now. Is that okay if it's priority number 3? Oh, okay, all right. Now, you have something to make trade-offs, right? Light, cheap, fast, pick 2, you can't have them all, right? That's how you have to think about. So, let's summarize. Product vision, business objectives, timeframes, themes, disclaimer. That's your basics of a roadmap. Right? You have secondary things to add more detail, and you can even add things I'll call complementary. They may come from like a release plan, right? Something more of a project plan. They're not necessarily part of a roadmap. That's why I'm calling them complementary and not tertiary. And you may need to put them on depending on your stakeholder. Like, are you presenting to the CEO? Are you presenting to marketing? You're presenting to engineering? Who are you presenting to, and what do they need? And like I said, they all vary in terms of type. The most important thing, though, is remember that your roadmap and your release plan are 2 different things. One will manage to outcomes. The other one manages to outputs, right? Just like we heard from earlier about the manufacturing, those are all managing outputs and activities. But a roadmap tries to drive towards outcomes. What are you doing all these activities for? Why are you building all these features, right? And a roadmap can ultimately be a prototype of your product strategy. You can put this out there because it can change, right? People can look at this and say, oh, I see where you're going. And you actually can get feedback on it. That's what Buffer does. They put things out there and they get feedback on their roadmap, on the items that are in consideration, and that helps them learn how they should tweak things as they move forward. The important part to the distinction here is that product management is not project management. They are 2 different things, 2 different skill sets, 2 different ways to approach things. Some of you might say, but I'm just an engineer, I'm just a designer. Right? I'm not the CEO, I'm not the CPO, I'm not a VP to do this, right? Well, I challenge you to go back to your leaders, right? And are you following those agile processes? Ask questions, right? Okay, these are the 4 basic values. Are you following these? I would add a 5th one. Drive to outcomes over outputs and activities, right? Ask, okay, we get this, what do we get when we get that feature? What does that get us as a business? So we create this mobile app, what does that get us? Right? We create this VR app, what does that get us? What does that get our users? Right? Even if just by asking those questions, forcing your leaders to answer them can help you get a clear vision of where you're going and why. Right? It also might force them to think more about the outcomes and less about the outputs. Right? And I always be careful about process. I've talked a little bit about roadmap processes, but the thing is, if you stop looking at outcomes and just focusing on process, you can just do process for process sake. I think this guy knows what he's doing, right? Do I have time for this? Do? Awesome. All right. Guys, get ready to move. So, I want everyone to stand up, and I'm going to time you. I want you to high five everyone in this room in 90 seconds. Go. High five everyone. Go. You're halfway there. Have you high-fived everybody? Almost? I've only gotten like 10 high fives. No? Have you high-fived everyone? All right. Almost. Yeah.
Good job, man.
Hey.
High five.
Hey. 30 seconds left. So you high-fived everybody. That's challenge number 1. Challenge number 2. Ready? 90 seconds. Make everyone in this room happy. Go. Is everyone happy?
You're bringing lunch to everyone.
I'm getting lunch to everyone? All right. Is everyone happy? You still got another 45 seconds. All right. So let's talk about that. First challenge, what was that about? That was about action. That was about execution. That was about activity, output. Second challenge, what was that about? Outcome, making people happy. One is a little bit harder than the other. It also is a little bit hard. It's easier to manage and measure the first one, right? We can easily measure if somebody has high-fived everybody, if everybody's high-fived everybody. We can measure that pretty easily, and it's probably a matter of efficiency in being able to do that. Second one's a little more challenging. What's going to make you happy might not be what makes you happy, might not be what makes me happy, might not be what makes those people happy. How do we know that? And somebody might say, oh, but people were laughing and smiling. Yeah, have you ever laughed and smiled and not been really happy? Uh-huh, I thought so, right? So measuring outcomes is always a challenge, right? But strive for it, right? This is the thing we have to think about. So when you're given a task to do, say, well, okay, what does this get us? Are we driving towards the happiness, right? Are we driving towards that outcome type of thing, right? Outputs and outcomes are not the same. And hopefully if you can drive that and push that, you're not going to light yourself on fire like I did. And what you're actually going to do is you're actually going to be a monkey in a spacesuit and be awesome. And with that, I thank you very much. The roadmap book is out. Thanks for listening. Say hello.